So, the inevitable has happened. Bernie Sanders has endorsed Biden to the surprise of literally no person with half a brain cell. Unless you happen to be a Bernie stan, that is, then this has come as a complete and utter shock to the system. A punch to the gut, to the point that now they have to start coming up with reasons to cope with this inevitability. But let this story be a lesson to you leftists. You cannot expect to do the same thing again and again and expect different results. Countless countries have tried to enact socialism. It has ended in famine, poverty, death, and societal and civilizational collapse, from Moscow to Caracas. Bernie Sanders has tried and failed 2 times to become the nominee of the Democratic Party. The first time it was left-wing populism of a more traditional type. In fact, you could even draw parallels to Trump himself. The second time, more of the same, but with added wokeness. Gone were the days of calling mass immigration a Koch brothers scheme. In was open borders and a commitment to multiculturalism, identity politics, and calling the orange man bad, all the names under the sun. Despite the fact he is not homophobic, a brief Google search will show he's been consistent on gay rights all his life. Indeed, Trump's mentor was a gay man. He is obviously not racist and was referring to illegal immigrants in his comments. You know, criminals. Moved the United States Embassy in Israel to Jerusalem and has called for more legal immigration. Some racist, some homophobe, but of course it was all a cynical ploy to get elected as the Democratic nominee. The party may be split, with Sanders on the far left socialist side and Biden on the neo-liberal side. Both pay lip service to wokeness. Sanders is playing the political game, flow like water, drift from stance to stance, to stay relevant and get elected. The Sanders of the Democratic primaries is not the same Sanders who stands to be elected in Vermont, but according to his fans, this is apparently not flip-flopping, it's just pragmatism, you see. It's apparently a strategy, somehow, to get his true platform across to the American people. Yet it hasn't worked. But not only that, the establishment itself, though aware of wokeness as a useful tool, also realised that a person like Sanders cannot win them elections. Don't get me wrong, neither can Biden, but it's like a choice between losing as bad as they did against Reagan in his re-election if they had picked Sanders, and losing with dignity, as they have chosen to do so with Biden. Neoconservatism and neoliberalism are dead political forces in America, and increasingly in Europe and the UK. Yet still, they are far more palatable to the electorate than full-on socialism. But again, Bernie Bros, what were you expecting? His core positions had not shifted since 2016, despite adding wokeness to the agenda. How exactly was he going to sell this package to a base that had more to choose from than just a 2-horse race that 2016 was? Although for sure his backing was bigger back then, but it's very obvious that in the intervening years it has diminished. Now it is even more apparent that in actual fact his support base was probably never that big anyway. How was he supposed to win in a packed race? If it weren't for the fact that Tulsi Gabbard single-handedly ended the runs of Warren and Harris, the likes of Gillibrand, Castro, etc. were basically irrelevant and not very good, and Yang nowhere near the force he was as a real person, as opposed to a meme, he was very lucky. Still, the likes of Klobuchar did give him a run for his money. Warren actually led him at some point, and even Bloomberg, when he came in late, was getting good numbers despite his seething unpopularity amongst the base. And of course, Buttigieg was the guy who was running second for quite a bit as well before he dropped out. In fact, he probably could have beaten Sanders. Biden even looked like he was going to lose at one point. Sadly, for Bernie, his brand of leftism is not something that every Democrat can get on board with. And as soon as the primaries branched out of the mainly urban areas, we soon saw Biden start to regain his lead. Sanders' lead was never that good, but if he is supposedly such a better candidate, how did he lose it? It was his to lose, and he failed. His brand of socialism is not even palatable to most Democrats, despite their pretty statist views. Not only that, his base, and a lot of you are going to be included in this, were not emboldened. All he had was the Latino vote and young people, with some other demographics. It was not enough. Young people are not a stable voting base, and neither are left-wing breadtube neats on Twitter. Also, considering Trump polls very well with Latinos and has a strong grassroots youth organisation, meant that Sanders was never going to win on that front, even if he had won the nomination. Biden, despite being completely demented, had a much better platform and was able to galvanise the demographics, like older voters, for example, to vote for him, mainly because statistically they do vote more. But he just scored more with the likes of black voters, for example, which, by the way, bad tactic Bernie stands to racially shame these people for voting for Biden. Going to help Grandpa, wasn't it? Sure, in the 2016 election, Bernie was the victim of legitimate rigging. The Democrats were desperate to get the first female president after Obama, and of course, Hillary being Hillary, corrupt as she is, was going to use every dirty trick in the book to get the nomination, just to be sure. Even now, I think some research is going to be needed to see how much the rigging genuinely hurt Sanders' campaign, because in these primaries, it is very clear that in a fair race, as it seems to have been, Bernie lost. In fact, you could argue this is an even worse defeat because there's no one to blame but himself. The same problems plagued Bernie as they did in 2016. Just like in 2016, where he was made to look weak by BLM activists, once again the same thing happened. Just this time it wasn't Black Lives Matter. He came across as incredibly weak, and not only that, he had a heart attack midway through the campaign, casting doubts on his ability to even survive the presidential election campaign. Sure, Biden is demented and is showing signs of senility and mental breakdown, but physically, the man is still the mean sniffer he was not too long ago. At least physically, Biden can handle it. All he had to do was outdie Sanders. He didn't even need to campaign near the end. Not only that, Sanders was just, well, he was not as charismatic, not as vigorous as he was in his 2016 campaign. It could have been age and the heart attack, but let's be frank here. His package was basically flogging a dead horse. His audience was nowhere near as galvanised. He had hardly any energy he could feed off of. There was no Yang Gang moment for him like there was in 2016 with the Bernie Bro meme. I think it's pretty clear he simply could not run a campaign to succeed anyway. But not only that, a lot of his younger millennial base are now older. Some of them are approaching 30. Some of them are in their 30s. Even 40s, and will have different lives and maybe even families. It's pretty clear those people have changed politically. They have drifted further right. Whether that is to the likes of Biden or Trump, it doesn't matter. 4 years on and the base is diminished. In 2016, I supported Sanders for the Democratic nominee because he was better than Hillary, just as I supported Trump for the Republicans. In my head, it was addressing the obvious imbalance politically we have in the Western world. I have of course changed since then. I still support Trump, but Bernie, no way. He's proven to be a shill and a hack, and since I now know much more about the perils of socialism, I cannot endorse that style of left-wing politics. I'm not even left-wing anymore. It's very clear that what the left parties need, if they are going to still be called that, is not progressivism or old-style Marxist socialist populism. The left needs a more grounded social liberalism. Not only does it fit more in the mould of what Trump is creating in the Republican Party, but it's saner and healthier for society. It's what Denmark actually is. But still, you supported him. Despite all this precedent, despite the obvious fact he was never going to win, and it was seen by literally everybody else, you still supported him. It's all down to your partisanship. You so hate Trump. The right, the neo-libs like Biden, you chose to support the worst option because in the end, you just want Gibbs and socialism. You aren't the Bernie bros who realised that Trump was their best bet for a better America, who realised the party is corrupt and broken, the system itself is broken and beyond repair, but you couldn't even be asked to vote for him in most of the primaries. You just sat there in your armchairs encouraging others to vote, and then sat in your echo chambers and expected a blue wave of Bernie to destroy the neo-lib establishment. To be fair, he too thought you would, but most of you didn't. How passionate are you really? Is it about Bernie? Is it about leftism, or is it about the orange man? Now, people like Shoe on Head are already flip-flopping. Once again, the pragmatism excuses are coming in too. Oh, we're just biting the bullet, holding our nose, we should vote Biden in swing states, third party in red areas, because apparently that will show their viability. Third parties haven't been viable since Teddy Roosevelt. It is pretty clear what this strategy, as represented by Shoe, is really about. Stopping the right from winning the election. That's it. It's just an anti-Trump thing, as it usually is with you guys. If it were not, you'd be encouraging people to follow their hearts for this coming election. Instead, it's stop Trump at all costs, even if it means electing a demented neoliberal who will just return the United States back to the days of Bush and Obama. Those days of managed decline that nearly cost America, and you are willing to reset the clock on the progress Trump has actually made pre-pandemic in rebuilding the country. It's your choice, but we warned you. We told you what would happen. Everything has happened like clockwork. It has been the most predictable primaries, and you have reacted at every event that spelt the end with incredulous shock. Now you are having to come up with excuses to come up with coping mechanisms. The salt is flowing, and well, I hate to say we told you. But you know what, boys? We all know who really won the Democratic primaries, don't we? Yeah!
The president needs to be a lot quieter, but send a signal that we're prepared to act in the national security interests of this country to get back in the business of creating a more peaceful world. Please clap.